The first message arrived on a Tuesday morning, crackling through every communication array humanity had established in the outer colonies. Captain Sarah Chun was enjoying her morning coffee aboard the exploration vessel Persistence when the ship's AI, Marcus, interrupted with unprecedented urgency. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission on all emergency frequencies. It's not human." Sarah set down her cup, instantly alert. In the 3 decades since humanity had developed faster-than-light travel, they'd encountered exactly 0 intelligent alien species. The universe had seemed disappointingly empty of neighbors. "Put it through, Marcus." The bridge filled with a sound like wind chimes mixed with digital static. Then, gradually, the ship's translation protocols began making sense of it. "Please, anyone who receives this message. We are the Kethmari of the Veil Nebula. Our world dies. Our children fade. We have tried everything. We send this message to any who might help, though we know none will come. We are too far. The danger too great. But we must try. Please, someone, anyone." The message repeated, coordinates embedded in the signal. Sarah stared at the star charts that materialized on her screen. The Veil Nebula was 18 months away at maximum jump speed. Deep in uncharted space. "Marcus, get me fleet command. Priority Alpha." Within hours, the alien distress call had reached every human settlement from Mars to the Tau Ceti colonies. The message sparked fierce debate. Some called it a hoax. Others worried about a trap. But one detail silenced many skeptics: the power requirements to broadcast across such vast distances would have been enormous. Whoever sent this was desperate enough to burn incredible amounts of energy on a message they didn't even believe would be. Answered. Admiral Rebecca Martinez convened an emergency session of the Colonial Defense Council. Representatives from across human space gathered virtually, their faces grave on the main screen of the council chambers on Luna. "The xenobiology teams have analyzed the transmission," Martinez began. "The language patterns, the digital encoding, even the harmonic frequencies, it's all completely alien. If this is a hoax, it's the most sophisticated one in human history." Representative Davis from Europa leaned forward. "Even if it's real, Admiral, we're talking about sending ships 18 months into unknown space based on a distress call. We don't know these Kethmari. We don't know what's threatening them. We don't even know if they're telling the truth. They could be predators," added Counselor Yates from Alpha Centauri, "luring in rescue ships to attack them." Sarah, attending virtually from the Persistence, spoke up. "With respect, counselors, did you hear the desperation in that message? That wasn't the voice of predators setting a trap. That was the sound of parents watching their children die." The debate raged for hours. Military strategists warned about the risks of entering unknown space. Scientists argued about the unprecedented opportunity to make first contact. Economists calculated the massive resource expenditure required for such a mission, but it was Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's chief xenobiologist, who shifted the discussion. "For 30 years, we've wondered if we were alone. We've scanned the stars, sent probes, explored dozens of systems. We finally received proof that we're not alone, and it's a call for help. How we respond to this moment will define us as a species." Representative Singh from Mars nodded slowly. "My grandmother used to tell stories about the old Mumbai floods of 2157. She said strangers came from across the world to help, people who had never met her, would never see her again. They came because someone needed help. That's what people do." The debate continued, but Sarah could see minds changing. Humanity had always prided itself on its explorers, its pioneers, its protectors. The idea of ignoring a desperate plea for help sat uncomfortably with many. Finally, Admiral Martinez called for a preliminary vote. The result was closer than expected, barely 60% in favor of mounting a rescue mission. But it was enough. "The motion passes," Martinez announced. "We will organize a task force to respond to the Kethmari distress call. I want volunteers only. This mission is entirely voluntary." The response was overwhelming. Within 24 hours, over 300 ships had volunteered for the mission. Exploration vessels, cargo haulers, research ships, even private yachts. The Colonial Defense Force contributed 2 destroyers and a heavy cruiser. More importantly, thousands of humans volunteered their skills. Doctors, engineers, linguists, soldiers. Scientist. Sarah wasn't surprised when the Persistence was selected as the mission flagship. Her ship had the most advanced sensor array in the fleet, and her crew had more deep space experience than almost anyone. What did surprise her was the caliber of volunteers who requested transfer to her ship. Dr. James Wright, the foremost expert on emergency terraforming, abandoned a lucrative research position to join the mission. Commander Lisa Park, a decorated veteran of the IO mining conflicts, transferred from a comfortable posting to volunteer as tactical officer. Even young Tommy Martinez, no relation to the Admiral, barely eaten and fresh from engineering school, somehow talked his way onto the crew. Why? Sarah asked him during his interview. You could have any posting in the fleet. Why volunteer for a mission that might be 18 months in space, followed by certain danger? Tommy shifted uncomfortably, then straightened his shoulders. Captain, my great-grandfather was one of the responders to the Europa Dome breach in 2198. He always said the measure of a person wasn't what they did when it was easy, it was what they did when someone needed help and nobody was watching. Well, the whole galaxy is watching now. As the task force assembled, a fascinating thing happened. The mission began attracting attention from unexpected quarters. The Martian Mining Consortium donated advanced atmospheric processors. The Lunar Medical Foundation provided experimental healing technologies. Even the notorious smuggler Jake Morrison showed up with a cargo ship full of supplies, grinning as he explained that he'd liberated them from various corporate stockpiles. Consider it my contribution to interspecies relations, he said with a wink, the task force. That finally departed Sol system 3 weeks later was unlike anything humanity had ever assembled. 112 ships carrying nearly 8,000 volunteers. They represented every human colony, every profession, every walk of life. United by a simple principle, someone needed help. The journey to the Veil Nebula would take 18 months of jump travel interspersed with periods of conventional flight to allow the jump drives to recharge. It was during these quiet periods that the true character of the mission emerged. Dr. Vasquez organized language classes, working with the AI systems to decode more of the Shethmari transmissions that continued to arrive sporadically. Each message painted a grimmer picture. Something called the Grey Death was consuming their world, turning their forests to ash and their cities to dust. Commander Park ran tactical drills, preparing for unknown threats. But she also organized cultural exchange programs, encouraging crew members to share their stories, their traditions, their hopes for the mission. Dr. Wright led teams in developing theoretical solutions for various planetary crises, from atmospheric collapse to ecological devastation. His workshops became some of the most popular gatherings in the fleet. And through it all, the fleet maintained perfect cohesion. No one deserted. No one demanded to turn back. When the cargo ship Golden Venture suffered a critical engine failure 8 months into the journey, the entire fleet stopped while repair teams worked around the clock to fix it. We leave no one behind, Sarah reminded anyone who suggested the ship should be abandoned. That includes each other. It was during the 15th month of their journey that they received the most devastating Kethmari transmission yet. The alien voice, weaker now, spoke of entire continents falling silent, of the last cities preparing for evacuation to underground shelters that might buy them a few more months. We do not expect rescue now, the message concluded. We know we asked too much of the void, but we thank whoever listened. In our final days, it comforts us to know we were heard. The message hit the fleet hard. Several ships requested permission to increase jump frequency, willing to risk drive burnout to arrive faster. Sarah denied the requests, but she understood the sentiment. They were racing against extinction. It was young Tommy Martinez who provided the perspective everyone needed. During one of the regular fleet-wide broadcasts, he spoke from the Persistence's engineering section. I've been thinking about that message, he said, about how they've given up hope. And I realized something. They don't know what humans are like. They don't know that we once survived an ice age with stone tools, that we've pulled people from burning buildings, that we've flown into hurricanes to rescue strangers. They don't know that the words, "it's impossible," just make us try harder. He looked directly into the camera. They're about to find out. As the task force entered the final months of their journey, the crew began making final preparations. Medical teams organized field hospitals. Engineers prepared terraforming equipment. Scientists readied research protocols. Marines checked weapons and combat gear, hoping they wouldn't be needed but ready if they were. But it was the simple human moments that Sarah remembered most clearly. Chief Petty Officer Reynolds teaching his why. The first Kethmari ship that approached the human fleet was barely functional. Its hull showed signs of severe corrosion, and emergency patches covered what had once been elegant curves. When it limped toward the Persistence, Sarah could see actual holes in its superstructure. "Captain," Lieutenant Park reported, "they're transmitting on multiple frequencies. The translation software is having trouble, but I think they're asking who we are." "Tell them we received their distress call," Sarah replied. "Tell them we're here to help." The response, when it came, nearly broke Sarah's heart. The alien voice, the same one from the distress calls, spoke with a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. You came? Across the void, you came. But you are too late. The Grey Death has taken 7 of our worlds. Only Kethmor Prime remains, and it fails as we speak. You should not have come. You will die with us. Dr. Vasquez, who had been working on Kethmari linguistics for 18 months, stepped forward. "Captain, request permission to respond directly. I think I can communicate more effectively now." Sarah nodded, and Dr. Vasquez activated the communication system. Speaking in carefully pronounced Kethmari, she said, "We are humans. We do not run from death. We fight it." The silence that followed stretched for long minutes. Then the Kethmari ship began transmitting detailed data about their crisis. The Grey Death, as they called it, wasn't a disease in any conventional sense. It was a form of aggressive nanotechnology created by an extinct race called the Harbingers. The nanites consumed organic matter, converting it into more of themselves, spreading across planets like a technological plague. They had lain dormant in the nebula for millennia until Kethmari mining operations had accidentally awakened them. "Show me the affected worlds," Sarah commanded. The tactical display lit up with devastating images. Entire continents reduced to gray dust. Oceans turned into metallic sludge. Cities consumed so completely that only geometric patterns remained where they had stood. "How long does Kethmor Prime have?" Dr. Wright asked. The alien response was grim. "Days, perhaps hours. The atmospheric processors are failing. The nanites have learned to consume our technology as well as our biology." Commander Park studied the tactical data. "Captain, I'm seeing something interesting. The nanite expansion slows significantly in areas with high electromagnetic interference, and it stops completely in regions with extreme temperature variations." Dr. Wright nodded excitedly. "That makes sense. Nanotechnology requires precise environmental conditions to function optimally. Disrupt those conditions, and you disrupt the nanites," Sarah finished. She opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is the captain. We have a mission profile. Dr. Wright will coordinate terraforming teams. Commander Park will handle tactical deployment. Dr. Vasquez will maintain communications with the Kethmari. We're going to save their world." What followed was humanity at its finest. The task force divided into specialized groups, each attacking the problem from different angles. The cargo ships began deploying massive electromagnetic pulse generators, while the engineering vessels started constructing thermal regulation stations, but it was the human approach to the problem that amazed the Kethmari. Where they had seen only an unstoppable catastrophe, humans saw a complex but solvable engineering challenge. Tommy Martinez, despite his youth, proved invaluable. His fresh perspective on the nanite data led to a crucial insight. The nanites aren't just consuming material, he explained during a briefing. They're trying to achieve perfect efficiency. But perfect efficiency makes them predictable. We can use that against them. The first test of human ingenuity came at the Kethmari agricultural colony of Verdian. The planet had been partially consumed, with gray zones spreading outward from multiple contamination sites. Dr. Wright's teams deployed atmospheric processors that created massive temperature gradients, scorching heat followed by flash freezing. The results were immediate. The nanite expansion stopped. More importantly, the existing nanites began to break down under the thermal stress. "It's working," reported Chief Engineer Santos from the surface. "The gray zones are actually shrinking." But the real test would be Kethmar Prime, where billions of Kethmari waited in underground shelters as the nanites consumed their world above. The human fleet arrived to find a planet in its death throes. The atmosphere itself seemed gray and lifeless. Massive storms of nanites swirled across the surface, consuming everything they touched. "Captain," reported Dr. Vasquez, "I'm receiving transmissions from the underground facilities. The Kethmari leadership wants to speak with you directly." The holographic image that appeared on the bridge was both alien and heartbreakingly familiar. The Kethmari leader, who identified herself as Prime Coordinator Zethelin, resembled a graceful humanoid with luminescent skin and large, expressive eyes that currently held barely contained despair. "Humans," she said, her translated voice carrying both wonder and sorrow. "We are honored by your presence, but you must understand, this world is lost. The nanites will consume your ships as readily as our cities. You should save yourselves while you can." Sarah stepped forward. "Prime Coordinator, with respect, you don't understand what humans are capable of. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and every catastrophe our homeworld could throw at us. We didn't travel 18 months across the galaxy to watch you die." "But the nanites are everywhere," Zethelin protested. "They adapt to our every defense. They learn from our attempts to stop them." Commander Park smiled grimly. "Prime Coordinator, they may learn from your attempts. But they've never encountered human attempts. We're about to show them something new." The plan that unfolded over the next 6 hours was audacious even by human standards. Instead of fighting the nanites directly, they would exploit their greatest strength, their drive for perfect efficiency. Dr. Wright's teams deployed thousands of bait stations across the planet's surface. Each station contained materials that would be incredibly attractive to the nanites: rare metals, complex polymers, and most importantly, a new type of smart material that Tommy Martinez had designed. The smart material appeared to be the perfect food for nanites, incredibly energy-dense and easy to process. In reality, it was a trap. Once consumed, it would cause the nanites to enter an efficiency optimization cycle that would gradually make them more and more specialized, until they could only process that specific material. "It's like training bacteria to eat only sugar," Tommy explained to the fascinated Kethmari scientists who had been brought up from the shelters to observe. "Eventually, they forget how to eat anything else." The deployment was dangerous work. Human teams had to operate on the surface of a world where the very air was hostile to organic life. They wore environmental suits that made them look like walking tanks, but even so, several teams had close calls with nanite swarms. It was during one of these deployments that the humans truly proved their nature. A team led by Chief Petty Officer Reynolds was installing a bait station when a massive nanite storm appeared on the horizon, a wall of gray death moving at incredible speed. Their evacuation ship had been damaged by nanite infiltration and couldn't take off. They were trapped. "All units, this is Reynolds," came the calm voice over the radio. "We're cut off here. Storm's moving too fast. Tell my wife I love her." "Negative, Chief." Sarah's voice cut through the channel. "No one gets left behind. All ships, emergency response protocol. Get our people out of there." What followed was a display of human teamwork and courage that left the Kethmari observers speechless. Ships dove through the nanet storm, their hulls being eaten away even as they flew. The destroyer Defiant actually flew directly into the storm. Using its mast to shield smaller rescue craft, Reynolds and his team were extracted with seconds to spare. Though 3 ships suffered critical damage in the process. Why? Asked the Cephalon, watching the recordings later. Why risk so many to save so few? Dr. Vasquez looked at her with surprise. Because they're ours? She said simply. That's what families do. As the bait stations began to take effect, the nanet's behavior started to change. Instead of spreading randomly, they began converging on the stations, drawn by the irresistible smart material. And as they consumed it, their programming began to shift. Within 12 hours, the first signs of success appeared. Nanet swarms that had been consuming everything in their path began to ignore organic matter, focusing exclusively on the bait material. Within 24 hours, entire regions were clearing as the nanets abandoned their previous consumption patterns, but the real breakthrough came when young. Engineering specialist Martinez made another crucial observation. The nanets aren't just becoming specialized, he reported excitedly. They're becoming competitive. Different swarms are fighting each other for access to the bait materials. This led to Phase 2 of the human plan, introducing variation into the bait materials. By creating slightly different versions of the smart material, the humans encouraged the nanets to differentiate into competing subspecies. The results exceeded all expectations. Within 48 hours, the nanet ecosystem had fractured into dozens of competing varieties, each specialized for different materials, each viewing the others as competitors rather than allies. It's brilliant, breathed Kethmari. 6 months after the nanets had been defeated, Captain Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the Persistence, looking down at a world transformed. Where gray death had once consumed everything, green forests now flourished. Crystal cities rose from reclaimed soil, their architecture a beautiful fusion of traditional Kethmari design and human engineering principles. The atmospheric processors are working beyond all expectations, reported Dr. Wright, joining her at the viewport. The Kethmari terraforming technology, combined with our temperature regulation systems, has created something neither of our species could have achieved alone. Sarah nodded, but her attention was focused on something else. In the distance, she could see the massive memorial being constructed at the site where the first predator nanets had been deployed. The structure was uniquely striking, a spiral of Kethmari crystal intertwined with human steel, reaching toward the stars. Have you seen the latest reports from the other worlds? Dr. Vasquez asked, approaching with a datapad. Verdian is completely restored. The mining colony at Kethsailor is not only operational but more productive than ever. And the agricultural world of Thrender is actually producing surplus food for the first time in decades. But it wasn't just the physical restoration that impressed Sarah over the past 6 months. Something unprecedented had happened. The Kethmari hadn't simply resumed their old way of life. They had embraced change, adopting human approaches to problem-solving, human attitudes toward cooperation, even human expressions of gratitude and friendship. Young Tommy Martinez had become something of a celebrity among Kethmari engineers. His approach to problems, looking for simple solutions to complex challenges, had revolutionized their technological development. Several Kethmari research teams had requested to study alongside him, and their combined innovations were advancing both species' understanding of the universe. Tommy, Sarah called to the young engineer, who was currently explaining orbital mechanics to a group of fascinated Kethmari children. How are your students doing? Tommy grinned, his enthusiasm undimmed by months of teaching. They're incredible, Captain. They see patterns I never noticed, and they ask questions that make me think about everything differently. One of the children, a young Kethmari named Velfin Minor, named after the scientist who had worked with the humans, tugged on Tommy's sleeve. Tell us again about the Ice Age, she said in carefully practiced English. This had become Tommy's most requested story. He had a gift for making human history accessible to alien minds, and his tales of human persistence had become almost mythical among the Kethmari. "Well," Tommy began, settling down to the children's level, "imagine your world covered in ice. No green forests, no warm cities, just cold and snow and ice as far as you could see. Most species would have given up. But humans? We learned to make fire. We learned to hunt. We learned to take care of each other. And eventually we learned to survive anything." The children listened with wide eyes, completely captivated. To them, humans had become figures of legend, beings who came from across the void to save strangers, who never gave up no matter how impossible the situation seemed. But it wasn't just among the children that humans had achieved legendary status. The Kethmari government had established what they called the Human Archive, a vast collection of human history, culture, philosophy, and science. They studied it not just out of curiosity, but as a blueprint for how a species could face seemingly impossible challenges. Prime Coordinator Zethelin had become one of the most vocal advocates for what the Kethmari called the human way. She had instituted new policies, based on human principles, that no citizen should be left behind in times of crisis, that complex problems often had simple solutions, and that cooperation across different groups was not just beneficial but essential. "Your species has taught us something profound," she told Sarah during one of their regular meetings. "We always believed that survival required avoiding danger, minimizing risk, staying safe. But humans have shown us that sometimes survival requires facing danger head-on, taking risks to help others, and finding safety through courage rather than caution." The transformation wasn't limited to the Kethmari homeworld. Word of the human rescue mission had spread throughout the Kethmari Stellar Republic. On colony worlds that had never been threatened by the Grey Death, human principles were being adopted. Kethmari exploration vessels had begun venturing into previously avoided regions of space, inspired by human boldness. Research programs that had been deemed too risky were being revived. Most remarkably, the Kethmari had established their own rescue services, modeled directly on the human task force. When a natural disaster struck the mining world of Veltainer, the Kethmari response was swift and selfless, values they had learned from watching humans in action. Dr. Chun, the poet who had organized readings during the journey to the Veil Nebula, had collaborated with Kethmari artists to create something unprecedented, the first truly interspecies artistic work. Their epic poem, Songs from the Void, told the story of the rescue mission from both human and Kethmari perspectives. It had become the most popular piece of literature in Kethmari history, but perhaps the most profound change was in how the Kethmari viewed themselves and their place in the universe. Before the Grey Death, they had been an insular species, focused primarily on their own worlds and concerns. The human rescue had opened their eyes to a larger galaxy, full of potential allies and friends. "We're preparing our first diplomatic mission to human space," Zethelin informed Sarah. "A full embassy, with representatives from every world in our republic. We want to establish formal relations, share technology, learn from each other." Sarah smiled. "I think humanity would welcome that very much." But it was Commander Park who pointed out the most significant development. "Captain, have you noticed what they're calling us in their official communications?" Sarah looked at her questioningly. "They don't call us humans anymore," Park continued. "In their formal documents, in their histories, in their children's stories, they call us the Deathworld Guardians. To them, we're not just another species. We're the beings who come when all hope is lost." This reputation had spread beyond the Kethmari. Through their trade networks and diplomatic channels, word of the human rescue mission had reached dozens of other alien species. Some were skeptical, others were curious, but all had taken note of a species that would travel across the galaxy to help strangers. The communications array aboard the Persistence had begun receiving messages from across the galaxy. Some were requests for help. Others were simply expressions of gratitude from species who had been inspired by the human example. A few were from civilizations offering alliance and friendship. "We've become something we never intended to be," Sarah mused, looking at the latest batch of interstellar communications. We came to help one species, and somehow we've become a symbol of hope for half the galaxy. Is that such a bad thing? Asked Dr. Vasquez. Before Sarah could answer, young Tommy burst onto the bridge, practically vibrating with excitement. Captain! You have to see this. The Kethmari children have created something incredible. He led them to the observation lounge, where a large holographic display showed what appeared to be a star map. But as Sarah looked closer, she realized it was much more than that. They've mapped every species they know of, Tommy explained. But look at this, they've marked every world that sent a message of thanks or a request for help since word of our mission spread. The map was stunning. Hundreds of star systems, dozens of species, all connected by lines of communication that traced back to human space. They're calling it the Network of Hope, Tommy continued. And they want us to help them build it into something real, an alliance of species committed to helping each other. Sarah stared at the map, understanding finally dawning on her. The simple decision to answer a distress call had set in motion something far greater than anyone had imagined over the following weeks. As the human task force prepared for the long journey home, the scope of their impact became clearer. The Kethmari had shared their technology for faster-than-light communication, allowing for real-time coordination across vast distances. Other species had contributed their own innovations, advanced medical techniques, environmental restoration methods, even artistic and cultural exchanges, but most importantly, they had all embraced the fundamental human principle that had started it all when someone calls for help. You answered. The departure ceremony was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from 17 different species gathered on Kethmor, primed to honor the humans who had saved not just one world, but potentially reshaped the entire galaxy's approach to cooperation and mutual aid. Prime. Coordinators Athilin delivered a speech that would be remembered for generations. The humans came to us as strangers. They leave as family. They came to save one world. They leave having shown us how to save ourselves. They came answering a desperate call for help. They leave knowing that call will never go unanswered again. As the human fleet departed the Veil Nebula, they carried with them more than just the gratitude of the Kethmari. They carried the promises of alliance from dozens of species, the blueprints for technologies that